Okay, so the first question that I'm going to answer is okay, when I get editing properly and not film on my phone, I'm going to upload the question so you guys can see the question as it's written. It might be a lot easier, but for now, as I'm recording from my phone, I'm just going to read out the question. We'll try and summarise it, but this one's quite short, so I'm just going to read it out. Okay, Salam sister, my situation. Where to begin? I'm just going to cut it short because my Snapchat message was actually really long. I'm a 22-year-old sister and I'm in a haram relationship with this guy, and we've gone to the lengths of committing zina. We're still together and our parents know we talk, and the intention of marriage is definitely on the cards. I'm now at a point where I'm trying to get closer to Allah, and every time I've tried before it's so difficult because I sin again, and then it becomes this vicious cycle of guilt and restlessness and shame. I'm a young sister who never thought I would be in this position, and like other girls, I'm afraid if I leave him, he'll find someone else and I'll be left a non-virgin. The questions come to mind, such as who's going to marry me, or it's going to be more difficult for me in the future. What do I do? It's so easy for people to say, just leave, but it's so difficult being in the position, overthinking everything. It's entirely my fault, and I take that into account. But I've been trying to find solutions in my head, and I just don't know where to go or who to talk to. Even though I've spoken to the guy about it, and he says I'm the one he will marry, I don't believe it, or I'm wary of it. Please help. Okay, just before I move forward, a lot of the questions are very relationship sort of centered. And before anyone starts telling me, oh, why are you talking about relationships that are haram? The way that I see it is this: like, our community and our culture, we don't speak about them, and they do happen. 1,000,000% they do happen. I've experienced it. Someone you know would have experienced it. You could have experienced it. That haram relationships happen regardless of whether we pretend like we're in like some sort of hunky-dory wonderland, and they don't happen. They happen. So I don't think it's good to not sort of talk about it, because then people are sat making mistake after mistake after mistake because no one's talking about it. It's like a taboo. I think it's better to talk about it openly so that people can sort of maybe pick up some good advice and maybe sort of better their situation and avoid doing haram. So I don't want to hear like, oh yeah, there's no point in talking about it's haram, blah, blah, whatever. Okay, so in the situation, I completely understand your worries that you're not a virgin anymore, which is probably the zone that you were talking about, and you don't want to leave, because if you do leave, then you're going to be a non-virgin that hasn't been married previously, and obviously future marriages are going to possibly be a problem. If I was in your situation, what would I do? Honestly, the fact that you've committed zina and the fact that you've done haram is not a reason to continue doing haram. God can see your situation, and God knows that your worry is your future, and if you make the right decision, I feel like God will make your future a bit easier than you would sort of envisage it to be. Personally, in your situation, what I would do is I would 100%, I would give him an ultimatum, not like a harsh ultimatum, but an ultimatum in that I want to move close to my religion, and I can't do that while we're having this relationship in haram, and see what he says. I mean, if he really does love you, then he'll completely understand that. I mean, you're 22 years old. It's not the youngest age to at least get engaged, at least perform your niqah or your Islamic marriage. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't continue doing haram. It's not worth it, because just consider it like this: you're obviously you're not pleasing God in what you're doing right now. The more you continue to not please God, it might not end in the way that you want anyway. You might end up just growing apart regardless, and then you've continued to do haram all the way up until this point. Like, for instance, you might stay with each other. If you continue to stay in the relationship, you might stay with each other for another year, and at the end of the year, he might decide that he doesn't want the relationship. You might decide that you can't do it. Like, don't just stay there because of the haram that you committed and the worry that no one else will have you. Allah will always open up the roads for you. Like, once you can see that you're trying, he says, move one step closer to me and I'll come running to you. So me, in your situation, 100%, I'll give him the ultimatum. We need to get married now. We need to have we need to make this halal now and move forward in making it halal, especially because your parents know about it. And if he's like a bit like wary about it, a bit reluctant, I would literally cut it off. Chances are, if he loves you enough and he was wary about the decision to get married when you gave him the ultimatum, if you cut off from him, he will eventually miss you and he will eventually realise what he's lost, but you have to cut off from him for him to realise that, if he is going to realise that. And if he's not going to realise that, then he obviously wasn't the right person for you anyway. He didn't love you enough. I think, like, I always say this, I may not be the most religious person in the world, but I always say try and find a partner who's religious, who loves God so much, because if he loves God, he'll always treat you right, regardless of how he feels about you. He'll always treat you right. And if this guy had more iman, I can't say he hasn't got iman, who am I to judge, but if he had a bit more iman and a bit more love, you know, in his religion, then he wouldn't want you to be committing haram, and he wouldn't want himself to be committing haram. So yeah, that's my answer. Give him the ultimatum, and depending on what he says, cut him loose. And don't worry about. I know it's a big thing to worry about, but you've already done it now. It's not like don't do it. I'm not here advising you don't do it. You've already done it. You've already made the mistake. It's a big mistake, and I'm not going to downplay it and pretend it's not. It is a big mistake, but don't continue making that mistake. Allah knows it. Allah will forgive you for anything that you're remorseful for and you repent for. And as long as you don't do it again, there's no point repenting for the mistake and then you said you keep doing the sin again. There's no, Allah, like, it's not a joke, basically. You can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I want to move closer, and then you go back and do it. But once you fully repent and you're 100% not going to go back to doing that sin, don't sort of, like, have faith in Allah's forgiveness and Allah's mercy, and just sort of, like, have faith in Allah and what He has planned for you. All we can do, we don't know what sort of our future holds for us, but all we can do is do our best to make the right decisions for ourselves that are in line with our faith and with our deen. But yeah, that's my answer for this. I'm going to do one question per video, unless it's very, very short. Then I'll do a couple. But yeah, that's all.